we start the meeting now then. Have not seen the last of the Corporate Director for Education and Family Support. There's a further report from him on the childcare sufficiency assessment for 2021 to 2022. Lindsay, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. It's the last one for me today. The purpose of this report is to inform Cabinet of the outcomes of the childcare sufficiency assessment and to seek approval of the gap analysis and action plan for submission to Welsh Government as part of the CSA for 2021-2022. This report provides further information derived from Bridgend County Borough Council's childcare sufficiency assessment and fulfils the statutory duty in accordance with the Childcare Act 2006, which requires local authorities to prepare assessments of the sufficiency of childcare provision in their area every 5 years and to keep these under review. The regulations require a full CSA and action plan to be submitted to the Welsh Government 5 years after the first. The Act also requires local authorities to secure, as far as reasonably practicable, the provision of childcare that is sufficient to meet the requirements of parents in their area to enable them to take up or remain in work or to undertake educational training which could reasonably be expected to assist them to obtain work. The gap analysis at Appendix 1 summarises the key results of the CSA and identifies gaps in provision across the county borough. This analysis informs the 5-year action plan, which is contained at Appendix 2. BCBC is meeting its statutory duty of providing sufficient childcare to working families. The CSA has, however, identified gaps in childcare provision and the availability of information. These gaps align with those identified by the local authority's childcare team, whose operational knowledge and expertise of the childcare sector is extremely well informed. The 5-year action plan will inform the priorities set out by the local authority's early years and childcare team, ensuring the local authority continues to meet its statutory duty. Currently, the childcare team has a core revenue budget of around £134,000, and the proportion of this is allocated to grants in order to support new developments and sustain existing childcare provision. The childcare team manages the childcare and play grant, totaling approximately £88,000, and a proportion of this grant is ring-fenced to support childcare provisions to remain sustainable and support the development of new provisions in the areas of identified need. Some 70 million has been identified by Welsh Government to support the capital provision of funded childcare for 2-year-olds over the next 2.5 years. Bridgend County Borough Council's allocation has not yet been confirmed, but once confirmed, will be reviewed to identify where you can support the gaps identified in our CSA. So therefore, Leader, I take it to the recommendations and ask that Cabinet approves the gap analysis and action plan for submission to Welsh Government as part of BCBC's childcare sufficiency assessment. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lindsay. Councillor Blundell, please, and then the DEP.
Thank you, Leader. And again, thank you, Lindsay. Let me just stick my hand down before I forget. Yes, so as Lindsay outlined, this is a regular report that we compile as part of our statutory duty towards child care sufficiency. As you identified, there has been 70 million brought forward by the Welsh Government to support the childcare for 2-year-olds. Although we haven't had our allocation confirmed just yet, this money will be going forward to support the gaps that has been identified. So I'll move members to the recommendations, which are to approve the analysis and our action plan, which will be submitted to Welsh Government subsequently. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Blundell. Deputy Leader.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm happy to second this report, but I would sort of, God, I can't even think at this time. So I think this is a really, really generous offer by Bridgend to our residents. That my concern is around the grant funding element again. Welsh Government they keep giving us grant funding for 3 to 5 years, but actually this is not long term, and I want to know how we're going to provide it going forward. I do think it's expensive for parents, but I think Welsh Government need to give us some indication around timeframes and timelines and how they're going to put that grant funding into our RSG. I'm quite happy again to write another letter to Welsh Government and express our concerns. I think that's quite right and proper. I will need assistance from Lindsay as to the technical information required in that, but I do think I'm quite happy to second this, Leader.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. is, of course, welcome that investment from Welsh Government, and we will need to identify as quickly as we can timescales and requirements about that, because there's potentially a large sum of money that will need to be deployed in a quite a short time scale, and we often find, don't we, that we are left in a very difficult position when funding is offered at the last minute, and of course, particularly when we are undertaking a capital investment that requires a long lead-in time, doesn't it? For example, planning is often required, and of course, there's the procurement to undertake. So the recommendations have been moved and seconded. Do I have support from the Cabinet colleagues? I can see that Councillor Farr, Councillor Spanzik and Councillor Williams are in support, and therefore we can move on. But before we do, I wanted to thank the Corporate Director for Education and Family Support. There is possibly a medal there for you for presenting 9 reports. I think there's 10 reports, so there's probably a record that you've just made. Only one out of order. Thank you for that, Lindsay. So we'll give you a break now, and we will ask the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change to give her report on budget monitoring and the Q2 revenue forecast. Carys, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Leader. Just to introduce myself then, I'm Carys Lord, and I'm the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change. The purpose of this report is to provide for Cabinet an update on the Council's revenue financial position as at the end of September this year. The approved revenue budget for this year is 319.5 million, and the Council's net revenue budget and projected outturn for this year is shown in Table 1 of this afternoon's report. The table outlines a projected position at the end of September, which is a net overspend of £3.4 million. This is made up of a net overspend on directorate budgets of 6 million and a net underspend of 2.6 million on our council-wide budgets. This is a significant change from the position that we reported in at the end of Q1, which was a net underspend of £745,000. Members will be aware that Welsh Government Hardship Fund, which provided financial support for local authorities during the last 2 financial years, was significantly reduced at the end of March 2022, when COVID restrictions were removed in Wales. However, local authorities continue to administer some elements of this hardship fund during the current financial year, and at the end of September, the Council had claimed a total of £1.8 million to cover expenditure incurred in relation to self-isolation payments, statutory sick pay enhancements and free school meals, and details of the amounts claimed can be seen at Table 2 of the report. There have been some budget variants and technical adjustments between the budgets since the Q1 revenue forecast was presented to you, and those are detailed for you at paragraph 417 in today's report. There are a number of significant financial pressures which are now impacting on our current budget position, and these include negotiations with regards to pay claims for all staff are yet to be concluded. And once these are settled, the impact on the budget will be reported to Cabinet for future monitoring reports. The Council is also experiencing the impact of rising costs resulting from Brexit, the impact of the war in the Ukraine, and also increases in inflation that have not been seen for over a decade. Inflation rates have fluctuated since the budget was set, as CPI was at that point 6.2%. and it's now increased to 9.9% as at August. And in comparison, inflation rates in August last year were 3.2%. This is having a significant impact on our budget. We're also seeing a significant increase in demand for many of our services, and that's also impacting on our budget position. If I might, Leader, I would just say that this is the first time in my career in local government that I've had to report such significant in-year budget pressures. It's unheard of, really. So I suppose I'd want to reassure you it's reflected across Wales. It's not just unique to Bridgend, but for all the reasons I've just outlined, there are significant pressures now sitting in this year's budget. So I'd just like you to note that really, and to say, to reassure you that we are monitoring this all of the time. We will obviously come back to you with update reports on the budget position, but I'm sure you're appreciating the current economic climate. These things are changing, dare I say, on a daily basis, really. So we are monitoring it very closely. I just wanted to reassure you of that as well, really. You'll also know that last time we reported there are some budget savings sitting in our revenue account, some of which refer to prior years and some of which refer to this year's. Some of them are difficult to find, but just to say that services are working hard to identify what savings they can, and we'll obviously monitor this as well and report progress on that when we come to you with the Q3 outturn. So this afternoon's report does provide a significant amount of detail for you with regard to the financial position across the authority. And you can see that in Appendix 3 in a lot of detail then in the report within Section 4.3 of your report. So if I may, Leader, I'll take you to Section 9 of the report and the recommendation that Cabinet notes the projected revenue position for the current financial year. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Carys. Councillor Williams, please.
I think everyone.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. It's the position has become very grave, hasn't it? And I certainly have not seen financial outlook like this. In all our years of responding to austerity, it has not been as significant as the challenges that we face today. And what makes it even more difficult is that national financial outlook also seems to change by the day, and the context in which we are working changes by the day as we wait for the latest announcement from the UK government, and that makes it very difficult to plan for the future. I will bring the Deputy Leader.
Thanks, Leader. I want to say that I'm happy to second the report, but I'm definitely not happy about our budget position here in Bridgend. I think I wanted to raise members' awareness around Social Services and Wellbeing Directorate, particularly that all current projections are indicating that we are going to be overspent by £7.499 million by the year-end financial. I think it's really important to note as well that some of the overspends are in learning disabilities, day opportunities, older people's residential care, mental health, home care, equipment and adaptations, learning disabilities. All of them have got overspends already. Part of that is down to the demand because we are led by service demand. But part of that is around the cost of living crisis and the increase in all energy, in any equipment that we need, whatever we need. We know that there's going to be an overspend. So I think the challenge ahead is quite significant. I do think we need to raise our residents' awareness to this, irrespective of the fact that we have to deliver social services. As soon as somebody presents at the front door, I want to say, but actually I'm quite frightened about how we're going to do that in the future and how we're going to protect our most vulnerable residents. I think it's a conversation that needs to be held wider, and I think all members, irrespective of their political affiliation, is something that they need to raise with their political groups as well, because we need to lobby Westminster with regard to the consequentials. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader, and it's important to also reflect that this is a financial outlook that has been experienced by every single local authority in Wales. All the reports I've seen from colleagues and neighbouring authorities in the north, the south, the east and the west, the reports are the same, and that is significant multi-million pound in-year overspends. So we are not alone. Every local authority is facing this. There are no easy options, and there are no options that we know of to tackle this overspend, because it is almost exclusively driven by inflation and by record levels of service demand. However, we will try and deliver on those savings that we are committed to making, and we will also always consider whatever options and tools that we have available to us to make further savings. But the Cabinet Member for Resources has already outlined how over the years we have already made over £60 million worth of savings and cuts, because some of them have been cuts, some of them have been savings, but we have exhausted most of the efficiency savings. There are still some to make, but they are not of the scale that would be required to close the gap that is growing by the day that we are predicting for this year's budget, and even more concerning is budget for next year as well. The proposal is to note the projected revenue position for 2022 to 2023 for the mover and the seconder. Is everyone in agreement with that? Councillor Farr, Councillor Spanzik and Councillor Blundell. In which case we will move on to the capital programme update. Quarter 2. Once again, that is a report of the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change. Carys, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. So the purpose of this report is to provide members with an update with regards to the capital programme position at the end of the second quarter of this financial year. So the capital strategy was approved by Council on the 23rd of February, and the approved capital budget at that time was agreed at £69.9 million. The programme is updated during the year, and the last time it was updated and approved was by Council in July this year. Section 4 of the report today outlines the current position on the capital programme. The revised programme for the year now totals £89.5 million, with £54 million of that being funded by Bridgend Council resources, and the balance is being funded from external sources. A breakdown of the programme across services is shown for you in Table 1 within the report. Details regarding individual schemes are shown for you in Appendix A. And as well as detail, the report details for you some new schemes and amended schemes which have come in since the report last came to you. So we're having funding streams to help us roll out the universal primary free school meals. We're having some funding to optimise learning environments for those with additional learning needs, and I suppose those have been referred to in some of the earlier reports today. There's some funding in there in relation to My Stake Town Hall, and some additional classroom provision at Ysgol Gymraeg Bro-Ogwr, again, which we discussed earlier on. So you'll see there are a number of changes to the programme since July. Many of these are actually funded via grant funding, so we'll have terms and conditions attached to them. The full programme therefore is shown for you at Appendix B, showing every scheme that we've got. The last thing I would just mention is that when Council approved the capital strategy for this year, it included some prudential indicators for the period 22-23 to 24-25. And Appendix D to the report shows that the Council is operating within these approved limits. So if I may, Leader, I take you to section 9 of the report, where it's recommended that Cabinet notes the Council's capital programme as of Q2 of this year, agrees that the revised capital programme shown in Appendix B be submitted to Council for approval, and that we ask that you note the projected prudential and other indicators for the current financial year. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Carys. Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Leader. I suppose a little bit better news in this report that we have received some additional grant funding from Welsh Government, which we are obviously very grateful for, and the schemes that are laid out there in Appendix A now that they will proceed hopefully within budget.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. And of note is the funding that's been made available for an additional mobile classroom at Bro Ogwen. So that is in addition to the planned redevelopment of the school, because in the meantime we do have a very high demand for places, and this will enable us to offer those places sooner than the opening of the new school. And likewise also welcome the funding by the Urban Centre Property Enhancement Scheme for the bringing back into use of a long-standing vacant property at the top of the Rue shopping centre. That is, I'm sure, welcomed by residents of Bridgend. So the recommendation has been moved by Councillor Williams. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Deputy Leader, and that's supported by Councillor Farr, Councillor Spanzik and Councillor Blundell, in which case we will move on to the next report of the Chief Officer of Finance, Performance and Change, and that is the annual Treasury Management Outturn report. But we won't do that because I have rushed ahead in optimism and hope rather than in the order in which the agenda is laid out. I will take you first to Treasury Management Quarter 1 report. Thank you, Carys.
Okay, thank you, Leader. As you said, I've got two reports on this afternoon's agenda with regards to Treasury Management, and this one is in relation to our performance for the first quarter of the year. So the purpose of this report is to show that we are complying with the requirements that we have in relation to Treasury Management activities during this year, and we're also reporting on our Treasury Management indicators again for this year. So I appreciate Treasury Management tends to be technical, but basically Treasury Management is about managing the Council's cash flows, our borrowing and our investment processes, and also the associated risks that go with those. So the Treasury Management strategy again was agreed by Council on the 23rd of February this year. And in Appendix A of today's report, you'll see the details of the activities for the first quarter of the year. Just in summary, some of those issues, the Council has had surplus funds for investment since April this year. The reason for this has been that we were able to establish some additional reserves when we closed the accounts for last year, but also that the Council, the Welsh Government actually paid 2 instalments of some of our core grants early in the year, which meant that we had surplus cash. So as a result of that, the investments that we're making have increased to £102 million at the end of that first quarter. And Appendix A details for you the movement of those investments between the different places that we actually place our money with. Local authorities and money market funds remain our 2 primary investment vehicles. We place money with local authorities for a period of between 1 month and up to a number of years, but currently all our present investments with local authorities are for 12 months or less. We also use money market funds a lot as we're able to get instant access. So at the 30th of June, the council had £44 million invested with other local authorities and £22 million in money market funds. So the majority of the council's investments are due to mature now within the next 3 months, with £8 million due to mature beyond that 6 months. At the end of June, our borrowing had slightly decreased due to some repayments of some small Salix loans that fell out during the year, and the details of our current borrowings are shown in Appendix A for you. So when we borrow money, our primary objective is to ensure that that debt is affordable, so that we can pay it back through our revenue account. And the majority of the loans that we hold have come to us via the Public Works Loan Board. The last time we actually borrowed as a council was back in 2012. So we've not borrowed for a long time. That covers the issues in the report, Leader, but if I may, I wonder whether I could add some extra detail in relation to 2 particular issues, both of which I know questions have been raised about recently. One is to do with our investments with Thurrock Council. We do hold investments. We hold 2 investments with that council. Total value of these is £8 million. Concerns have been raised from a number of places about whether or not we should be investing with them on the basis that they're having some problems at the current time. What I would reassure you is that both of the investments that have been made have been done so in accordance with our Treasury Management strategy, and also in accordance with the lending lists with which our Treasury Management advisors, our external advisors, recommend that we use. And advice was received about lending to Thurrock Council on both of those investments, and the investments were made prior to any changes in the advice coming out with regards to that council. We have invested with that council for a number of years, and repayments have always been made on time, and they've always been made in line with the agreements that we have in place. I suppose just by way of a quick update, Essex County Council has now been appointed in the role of Commissioner and Best Value Inspector at Thurrock, which means they are now managing their financial affairs, and they have confirmed that Thurrock will be repaying all of the investments that are placed with them. If necessarily, they will borrow through the Public Works Loan Board to replace them, but we've had assurance that both of those investments are secure and we will get that money back. The only second issue I wanted to raise, and it does link a little bit to what we were just saying on the revenue report, which is quite difficult at the moment to forecast what the impact on the council will be of the latest mini budget and the impact that that's having on markets. Obviously, our Treasury Management work is very influenced by what's happening on national and global markets, really. So we will obviously monitor that. It is likely, well, there are increases in interest rates being offered now for investments, so our money will work that little bit harder for us. Rates have been increasing slowly over the last year, and we've certainly seen a significant increase now in the last couple of months. Should rates rise more than we'd anticipated, then we will obviously review the loans that we've got. And if there is any thing that we'd want to do about repaying some of our loans, then obviously we will take external advice and we'll report to Cabinet prior to making that final decision. So if I can, Leader, just take you back to the report and the recommendation that we're asking you to note the Treasury Management activities for the period the 1st of April to the 30th of June and the projected Treasury Management indicators for this financial year.
Thank you for that comprehensive report, Caris. Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and thank Caris for that explanation of how the Treasury Management process operates. I suppose it's a critical element of any local authority's financial process. But just to reassure everyone, we do have independent expert financial advice. These decisions are not taken on a whim. That they are taken on expert advice. We often receive Welsh Government funding ahead of the need to draw it down, and we make best use of that funding if we can earn ourselves a little extra interest rate to help provide essential services. Then that's what the whole process is all about. So happy to move the report, and of course there'll likely be some opportunity to ask questions at tomorrow's council. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that. I can see the Chief Executive wants to come in, so I'll bring him in now. Mark, please.
Yeah, just briefly, Leader, I think it's very important in terms of being as transparent and open as possible that you mentioned the Thurrock example, Caris, and I know I've had a few pieces of correspondence on that over recent weeks and months. I just think it's important for transparency that we explain that all local authorities invest their money sometimes for short periods, knowing that they will need it in due course. But for a short period, it makes sense to invest it elsewhere because that provides a return. But I suppose the point I'm making, I'd like you to confirm, is that it's not therefore money that can be spent locally. It's already committed elsewhere, but effectively needs to be invested and makes return to the authority. Is that correct, just for clarification?
Yes, just to confirm, that is correct. The money that we have to invest is actually really our earmarked reserves. So the reason for using them is already clear. It's not money that's available for us to allocate anywhere else, and it's just a surplus for it until such time as we draw them down from those reserves.
Thank you for that. I think that's a clear explanation. I think you've given one example there of where we've had 2 payments of the revenue support grant from Welsh Government, which obviously is a payment for expenditure over a long period. And what we need to do obviously is deposit that funding somewhere. So it's a multi-million-pound grant from Welsh Government, and therefore it needs to be managed through this treasury management function. I think it's also important to stress that we use, as well as the independent expertise of a commissioned specialist, we also use accredited rating agencies. Standard & Poor's, Moody's and Fitch are the 3 that we used, and they're internationally recognised, and they're very much part of our assessment of where we deposit funds. The recommendation has been moved by Councillor Williams. Do I have a seconder, please? Deputy Leader, and I can see indications from Councillor Farr, Councillor Spanzer, Councillor Blundell, and therefore the recommendations are supported, and we will now move on to the next report, which is the Upton report on Treasury Management. Thank you, Caris, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. As you said, this is our annual Treasury Management report now for the last financial year, and we are required under from the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy to make sure that we do report this through to you, and this is going to Cabinet Council as well tomorrow. The report does outline for you the economic context within which we undertook our Treasury Management activities last year. So just by way of reminder, really, this was going on while the economy was still trying to recover from the coronavirus pandemic. We had rising inflation starting at the end of last year, and interest rates were starting to go up. And we were already seeing that employers were having difficulty in filling posts and things, which does impact on the ability to undertake, for example, our capital programme, and therefore it impacts on our borrowing. So just to confirm that during the year, the Prudential Code for Capital Finance and Treasury Management was updated, and I know we've reported this previously, which means that we can no longer borrow to invest primarily for financial return. And this code will actually be fully implemented in the current financial year. But what that does mean is that we cannot just borrow money unless it's supporting a particular service that we are running. So just to reassure you that during last year, we did comply with our legislative and regulatory requirements in relation to Treasury Management, and the detail of our activities during the year are shown in Appendix A. With regards to borrowing last year, we took out no long-term borrowing as a result of there was slippage in the capital programme, and also, as I reported in the previous one, we had an increase in our reserves during the year. Long-term borrowing did increase by a very small amount, but this was as a result of some schemes that were funded by the SAILEX interest-free borrowing scheme, and these amounts were actually relatively low. And just to reassure you really that if the opportunity should arise for us to reschedule any of our loans at a preferential rate, then necessary advice would be taken and proposals would be made. So at the end, I suppose just to reassure you that when the council does make investments, we follow three key principles. We have to ensure that that capital is secure. So I suppose that goes back to the Thurrock example that I've just given you. We have to be sure that we're going to get that money back. We have to ensure that we can access it quickly, so it has to be liquid. And then finally, and the third one that we look at is yield. But the security and the liquidity are the key ones that drive us. So on the basis of that, during last year, the council surplus cash was primarily invested in money market funds and with other local authorities. So I won't repeat what I said a minute ago, Leader, with regards to Thurrock and our other position with regards to the market. So I'll just take, if I can, to the recommendations at section 9, which is that we ask you to note the annual Treasury management activity for last year, and also to note the actual Treasury management indicators for last year against those approved in the Treasury management strategy for the same year. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Caris. Councillor Williams, please. Thank you. To the seconder. Deputies have your second. I can see support from Councillor Spanser, Councillor Farr and Councillor Blundell. We will therefore, thank you for that, Caris. We'll move on to the next report, which is approval for the tender of annual insurance policies. And once again, this is a report from the Chief Officer for Finance.
Okay, thank you, Leader. I won't take long on this one. We're just seeking support really to proceed to tender for competitive quotations for the council's annual insurance policies, all of which fall due for renewal now at the end of next financial year. So we're just seeking approval to go out to tender, to commence that tender process, and also to reassure Cabinet that we would come back to Cabinet at the end of that process to seek your approval for the final award of that tender.
Thank you for that, Caris. Councillor Williams, please.
Cautious about what the second report in the current climate, but you know.
Absolutely, and we'll just have to test the market. Do I have a seconder for that, please? The Dep is happy to second that, and I can see agreement from Councillor Farr, Councillor Spanser and Councillor Blundell, and we will receive that further report once the tender process has completed. So the next report is a report of the Monitoring Officer, and it is on the Constitution and Constitution Guide. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Leader. For the purposes of the recording, my name is Kelly Watson, the Monitoring Officer for the Authority. Cabinet, the purpose of this report today is for Cabinet to approve the revised Constitution and the Constitution Guide in relation to the executive functions prior to its submission to full Council tomorrow. Section 37 of the Local Government Act 2000 requires Welsh County Council to prepare and keep up to date a written constitution containing such information as Welsh ministers may direct, a copy of the Authority's standing orders, a copy of the Authority's Code of Conduct for members, and such other information as the Authority considers appropriate. Section 45 of the new Local Government and Elections Act Wales now requires principal councils to publish a constitution guide which explains in ordinary language the content of the council's constitution. The principal councils must also publish their constitution and constitution guide electronically and provide a hard copy on request. The All Wales Monitoring Officers Group, via funding from the Welsh Local Government Association, commissioned Bevan Brown Jacobson solicitors to draft a new model constitution and a model constitution guide. The style of the new constitution is more intelligible to the public, and we think there's less duplication in there. Following a local review by officers, some of the council's existing detailed provisions concerning procedure rules, code of conduct and protocols have been retained in order to preserve continuity and retain the valuable work that has been done over the years in reviewing each part of our existing constitution. Whilst the revised draft constitution as set out in Appendix 1 looks different from the current version. By its very nature, the document largely comprises the same elements, and these are set out in paragraph 4.3 of your report. Attached at Appendix 2 is a constitution guide based on the Brown-Jacobson model and adapted to reflect the Council's constitutional arrangements. A guide summarising all the provisions of the Constitution is also attached at Appendix 3. The Model Constitution and Guides were considered by the Democratic Services Committee in July, and the committee recommended that a working group be established with support from the Group Manager, Legal and Democratic Services to review all aspects of the Constitution. I'd like to thank Laura at this stage, Leader, because in fairness, she has been through this document line by line, making sure that it's appropriate for this council. Appendix 4 summarises the issues identified through discussions from the working group. Since the last meeting of the working group, it should be noted that further amendments have been made to the Officers' Code of Conduct, which is section 20, and this is following consultation with the trade unions. If Cabinet are minded to approve the recommendations of the working group and the Constitution, insofar as they relate to the executive functions, the Constitution and Guide could be implemented following approval by full Council and will be effected from the 1st of December 2022. My Leader, therefore, take you to the recommendations of paragraph 9.
Thank you for that, Kelly. Deputy Leader.
Thank you very much, Leader. Can I thank both, oh God, I can't even think of your names now. So Laura and Kelly, I couldn't think of Laura's name for a minute. Can I thank them both? Laura came into Cabinet to discuss this with us. I think you were on leave at the time. I like the way it's a bit more simplistic to read, especially if you're the average Joe. So any member of the public will be able to read our Constitution, particularly the appendices, and come to some conclusions themselves rather than wait for legal advice. So I'm very happy to move this. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you for that. Councillor Spanzik, please.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I'd like to second it as well. I'll just ask one quick question. On the working group, was that a cross-party working group that went through it?
Thank you, Councillor Spanzik. My understanding is very much a cross-party working group, and of course we welcome the contribution they made. They've clearly gone through it line by line as well. So
yeah.
Our appreciation and gratitude to those members. Kelly, can you confirm, please?
Yes, to confirm. So the working group was comprised of members of the Democratic Services Committee. It did include members from each group, and they were asked to feedback to their group and obviously to bring comments from their group to the working group as well.
Thank you for that, Monitoring Officer. So the recommendation's been moved and seconded. Do we have support from Councillor Blundell, Councillor Farr and Councillor Williams, in which case this will be approved, and we note that a report will be presented to Council tomorrow seeking approval for all the changes proposed to the Constitution. Thank you, Monitoring Officer, and we will now receive a further report from the Chief Officer for Legal and Regulatory, HR and Corporate Policy, and this report is on the proposed suspension of Council's contract procedure rules and award of contract for the supply of temporary workers. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'm presenting this report today with my hat of being the Chief Officer for HR. So the purpose of the report is to seek approval to put interim arrangements in place for the Council's contract for the provision of temporary workers and to suspend the relevant parts of the Council contract procedure rules with regards to the requirement to re-tender the contract. Temporary workers members provide the Council with key skills and experience in a variety of circumstances where it is not possible to recruit on a permanent basis. This may be because of a skill shortage in the market, an urgent need to cover a position due to planned or unplanned absence, seasonal demand or short-term funding. The current contract with Pertemps Agency is via the National Procurement Service, and this expires on the 10th of November 2022, and there are no further extension periods available. Welsh Government are currently developing a new MPS framework agreement to meet the needs of local authorities in Wales, acknowledging the recruitment challenges being faced in local government and increasing requirement for agency workers in some areas. In order to allow time for the new MPS framework agreement to be procured and for the Council to conduct its own exercise, a continuation of the existing contract is requested. A period of up to 18 months subject to review will enable the Council to explore specific professional frameworks in addition to the MPS framework and to take account of any other national developments on the agency worker procurement. To ensure continuity and knowledge of the existing provider, it is proposed the Cabinet suspends the relevant parts of the Council's CPRs, requiring a competitive procurement exercise in accordance with the requirements of the Public Contract Regs 2015. And Cabinet agrees to the awarding of the contract to the current provider based on current contractual arrangements until the 10th of May 2024, with an option to extend for 6 monthly reviews to extend for maximum flexibility. Leader, if there are no questions, I take Cabinet the recommendations at paragraph 9. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Deputy Leader, please.
Thanks very much, Leader. I'm happy to move the report. I think I do have concerns around agency staff. Welsh Government have given clear indications that we need to put some safeguards around monetary with our agency workers. I do think it's needed desperately. I think we disadvantage our own workforce with the way we're paying our agency staff. So I will be pleased to see this move on, but I'm quite happy to move it in the interim. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Deputy Leader, Councillor Williams, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm content to move the report. I take some satisfaction that we get the 6 monthly review to ensure that the service is still providing what we wanted to provide. And it will give us sort of time and flexibility then to shape the service going forward. So happy to second the report. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. Welcome the national approach that's been outlined by Welsh Government, but we have to recognise that will take some time, inevitably. And in the meantime, we need to have arrangements in place to secure those temporary workers. They are essential to the operation of this authority, particularly now. So this is the sensible way forward, instead of going out for a costly procurement exercise with a risk, as there aren't actually many providers with that base of Welsh workers. So I'm happy to support these proposals. Two, I know the report has been moved and seconded, so I now look to colleagues, and I can see heads are being nodded by Councillors Bundle, Farr and Spanswick. Okay, Modern Officer, and therefore we have support for the recommendations, and we can now progress on to the next item. Once again, a report to the Chief Officer for Legal, Regulatory, HR and Corporate Policy on the Cabinet Council and Overview and Scrutiny Forward Work Programme. So we're on the home straight here. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of this report is to seek Cabinet's approval for items to be included on your Forward Work Programme for the period the 1st of November 22 to the 28th of February 23, and for Cabinet to note the Council and Overview and Scrutiny Committee's Forward Work Programmes for the same period. In accordance with the Council's constitution, the Forward Work Programmes are prepared to cover a period of 4 months. The proposed Forward Work Programmes for Cabinet, Council and the Overview Scrutiny Committees are appended to your report. And I would just take you to the recommendations and ask you to approve the Cabinet Forward Work Programme and note the programmes for Council and Overview and Scrutiny Committees. Thank you.
Deputy Leader, please.
Thanks very much, Boss. I'm happy to move this. I do have a question, and I suppose it's around timing, because I'm aware that we changed our work programme last year because of the budget settlement dates. And are we in line with those dates now, looking at this? Because by my reckoning, we're not.
I think we're still up in the air in terms of those dates because there's going to be a late settlement. What we did at the AGM is we delegated, well, you delegated authority to myself to move any dates that need to be moved if we get a late settlement.
Thank you, Monitoring Officer, and of course, Caris is our Chief Finance Officer for Finance and Performance and Change. You must be as aghast as we all are at the I wouldn't ask you to comment politically, of course, but the current situation, if I can use that term, at the heart of UK government, and the almost daily changes now we're now seeing to the financial outlook for the public finances. And that may seem like a circus in Westminster to many, but the sad part is that it has a very real and very serious repercussion for the finances of every local authority in the country, including here in Wales, because the decisions that are made will have consequences for the block grant to Welsh Government as a result of the Barnett funding formula, and that will undoubtedly have an impact on our budget, and therefore we do not have the certainty that we should have around financial planning, including timescales, I have to say, given now that seemingly there is no stability at all at UK government level around the finances, and we cannot provide the, at least we had certainty around timescales previously. We do not even have that now. So it's been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement? And I can see nods from Councillor Farr, and I can see that people would like to speak at 6:45, and of course I will allow you to do that. We are nearly there, colleagues. Councillor Blundell and then Councillor Spanzer, please.
Thank you, Leader. No, it was just to say, obviously, to reiterate the Councillor Kirby's point, obviously we may have to move the budget one, and just a note to scrutiny chairs that maybe start thinking about items that you might want in there instead of, because as a former chair, I know it was frustrating having to change it last minute, so better get that pre-planned in. Thank you.
That's sage advice for scrutiny, colleagues. Thank you for that, Councillor Blundell. Councillor Spanzer, please.
Leader, and a little bit more advice for scrutiny, or perhaps a request for scrutiny. I'm not trying to be awkward, but on the forward work programme for scrutiny 3, 14th of November is to be confirmed, and we're now in the middle of October. There's very little time for scrutiny committee 3 to ask the directorate for whatever topic. So I'm not being awkward, but it's not going to be in blanket and then suddenly his request next week for something that hasn't been discussed.
Spanzer, all my years of knowing you, I've never known you to be knowingly or awkward. I can confirm that. But yeah, that's a good point. No doubt we will raise that with the scrutiny chair, and I'm sure that the corporate director is in liaison with scrutiny officers as well, because you are right, the report will need to be prepared and published, so the clock is ticking in that respect. Okay, thank you, colleagues. Finally, we have from the Chief Officer for Legal, Regulatory, HR and Corporate Policy, we have the information report for noting.
Thank you, Leader. This report is to inform Cabinet of the information report which has been published since your last scheduled meeting. You'll see a paragraph 4.1. There's only been one report this period, and that's the report Ombudsman Annual Letter 2021 to 2022. I would like to inform Cabinet that this report and the letter was presented to the Governance and Audit Committee. It was either earlier this week or late last week. And I'd also like to take you to the report that I'm asking you to note, just to point out some of the data there. So you'll see that the number of complaints against the authority was 55, and that was compared with 31 in 2020 to 2021. The Ombudsman in his annual letter suggests that complaints about public bodies were suppressed during the pandemic and then came through in greater numbers. What I would ask you to note is the figure for 2021-22 represents 0.37 complaints received per 1,000 residents. And out of those complaints, the Ombudsman intervened in 7 of the cases. 5 of them were settled by working with the Ombudsman, and 1 came to an early resolution. Cabinet had asked you to note the contents of the annual letter and the information report that's been presented. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Kelly, Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm happy to note this report, move noting of this report for Cabinet. I would like some indication about what the complaints were without identifying anybody. And I know that's hard to do, but I appreciate the top scorers in our complaints were always social services and education, as we would fully expect, if I'm really honest. But I would like to know what they were about, please, even if it's only a minor.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Appended to this report is just a very brief breakdown. In addition, we do take an annual report to the Governance and Audit Committee, usually in about April time, and that gives some more details. The slight difficulty we've got is that we record it slightly differently to the Ombudsman, so they don't always correlate. But we did discuss this in the Governance and Audit Committee, and we're going to try and find a way to timetable these so they can come together.
Thank you for that, and of course we carefully consider the report from the Ombudsman. It is very detailed. It is of note that in actual fact, because it's sensible to look at complaints received per 1,000 residents. Otherwise, poor old Cardiff will always be top of any league table, and Merthyr would be at the bottom. So if you look at complaints received per 1,000 residents, it's 0.37 for Bridgend, which is basically the average for Wales, and there is then a breakdown of some of those complaints, with some departments receiving no complaints at all, like benefits administration, and others receiving a higher number of complaints. But we have seen in that trend, haven't we, an increased level of complaints. And sadly, a number of complaints around the code of conduct of, in particular, town and community council members, and those complaints have not actually, in most cases, resulted in any action being required. So what we do ask people to consider, particularly people who are making complaints about the code of conduct of members, particularly when it's other members, because quite often it is a member complaints, that they consider the strength of that complaint, and whether there's an alternative way. And we would always encourage people to consider alternatives to make informal complaints. And certainly at the heart of our complaints process is that we try and address those complaints informally at the earliest opportunity, and try and address those issues rather than escalate it to the Ombudsman. But of course, there will be times where it is right and proper for complaints to be escalated to the Ombudsman. And then our responsibility is to make sure that where there are lessons to be learned, is that we learn those lessons and we make changes. And there is evidence where we have made changes as a result of complaints to the Ombudsman. So we do not see this as necessarily a negative process. We welcome it as one of the mechanisms by which we deliver service improvement. And I know that the Ombudsman expects us to give consideration to this letter and to this pack that he sends me. I think we have just undertaken that consideration, and not to forget as well that the statutory director for social services under her statutory duties will, in addition to this report, make her annual report on any complaints that we receive, and indeed compliments, and I think it's important to recognise compliments too, but also that report will detail the actions that we take as a result of any complaints that are progressed, and we will do that for any service area as well. So the recommendations have been moved and seconded that we note the report. We note the fact that there has been an increase, but there's been an increase across Wales, and we hope that that increase will not be sustained this year. Is everyone in agreement that report? Yes, I can see has been nodded by Councillors Farr, Spanzic, Blundell and Williams for the record. So I will take that as a complete agreement. That was the final item on a report on the agenda. There is an opportunity for, of course, urgent items, but I have had no urgent items that have been presented to me. So I will now move on to the item 32 on our agenda, which is a proposal to exclude the public to receive for approval exempt minutes. And you will see there the public interest test that I will ask the Monitoring Officer to outline to us before we take the decision to exclude members of the public. The Monitoring Officer, please.
Thank you, Leader. This is for approval of minutes. You have previously determined that the substantive reports be dealt with in exempt session. I'm not aware that there's any changes in circumstances, so my recommendation would be is that you apply the public interest test to determine whether the requirement to deal with things in open session is outweighed by the need to keep confidential information at this stage, obviously with the proviso that where possible in the future that information will be made public.
Thank you for that, Monitoring Officer. I certainly support that, and it's clear to me that the information contained within the minutes is still sensitive, and I know that will be at a future stage shared, but it is not proper to do so at this stage. Is everyone in agreement with that?
Yeah.
See agreement from Councillor Spanzic, Farr, Williams and the Deputy Leader, and therefore the members of the public will be excluded from this part of the meeting. Can I just check then with